Hey, what's up, everyone? Please don't mind the subwoofer in the background. Someone is obviously has got a boombox going in their vehicle, and they are parked out front. So I apologize for that. It's always something. But anyway, this volcano in the Philippines is spewing ash at the same time as Japan's volcano is erupting. And if you'll notice, you can see faces in these volcanic eruptions. At least I see faces. Let's see if you can see the face in this one. Yeah, you can plainly see a face in this volcanic eruption. These different images coming out of the Philippines, I see a lot of faces in these volcanic eruptions. This also looks like some kind of a being, like a large person. This is another Hawaiian volcano. They claim that makes. Let's see. Was this one right? They said they made a cartoon out of this Hawaiian volcano. That was a Disney cartoon, but you can also see that the volcano is erupting in the Philippines right now, and there's one erupting in Japan as well. I'm pretty sure that volcano that showed with a face on it, I'm sure that was fake. I'm pretty sure that was faked, but I know this one's not. This right here, there's so many faces in these volcanic eruptions that you'll see. This right here. Now, check that face out. You can't mistake that. That is a face. I mean, that is 100% a face. Now, where's this at? Yeah, that's in the Philippines as well. You can see a face. There are so many faces in these volcanic eruptions, and I don't know how you could miss it. But anyway, if any of you know anything about see, there's a story from. Now, obviously, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. But I just wondered about this whole Eden, and if you go back, I think it was 7,000 years or so ago, and, well, it's right there. They said Mesopotamia reached its peak 6,500 years ago, but they found some tablets from that many thousands of years ago, and they talked about Anu, and they talked about the main god. Now, let's see if I can find some information that I was looking for earlier. This is some of the information. Now, there is the origins of human beings according to ancient Sumerian texts. Now, this is kind of interesting. The ancient Sumerian texts, which the Sumerians were believed to be some of the first people, if not the first people, and it states, when in the height of heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Apsu, who begat them, and Chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When of the gods, none of them had been called into being. So it's like saying that none of the yes, there are many deities, many beings, many gods and goddesses, and all these things. It mentions Hades in the Bible. It mentions so different gods in the Bible. It even talks about Jesus Christ going down into the depths of hell, into Hades, to retrieve the keys. Now, I don't know if these are literal keys or obviously just could be crystals, could be keys, could be literal, could be some kind of a metaphorical meaning. But he went down there and retrieved them, so that yeah, I mean, all of this is in there in the verses that we read. And all of these different deities are mentioned. And they're all of this stuff is mentioned in various texts throughout this world. But it interests me of how the physical origins of how we're here. And I still believe, yes, I still believe. I believe in the Holy Trinity. But it says right in God, that's why it says he's a very jealous God. And I mean, you are to have no other gods before him. But it goes on here to say, no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. This is supposedly the translation of the Sumerian tablets. 7,000-year-old tablets. Or so. When of the gods none had been called into being. For some reason I keep missing the word of. I don't know why. I can't I don't know why I keep missing that. None of the gods, none of the other beings had been formed yet. And none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. So it's saying that God created the others, obviously. Lamu and Lahamu were called into being. So the Sumerian texts, and then they talked about these human-like gods that ruled over Earth, and then they came to Earth, and there was much work to be done. These gods, these beings toiled over the soil, digging it, making it habitable, and mining its minerals. And they claimed that at some point it mentioned that they decided to make humans, and then they then decided to have something bore the work, and they stated that you'll see these texts right here. They said, then they put in the clay, God and man shall be bound. Apparently they slaughtered one of the gods together with his personality. They have taken his genetics and put it into the dirt, into the ground, and then the genetics became a human. That's what this text states. This tablet, to a unity brought together, so that to the end of days the flesh and soul, which in a god have ripened, that soul in a blood kinship be bound. And then it goes on here, the epic of Gilgamesh, and the first man was created in Eden. Sumerian word means flat terrain. Eden is mentioned as the garden of the gods, and is located somewhere between Mesopotamia and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And then here's another tablet that describes the Sumerian tablet depicting Enki in the creation story or myth, their creation story. Every culture has their own creation story, obviously, and that's just interesting. Initially, human beings were unable to reproduce on their own, they said, but then they were later modified. And this is stories. Now, I don't know. I have heard these things. I've actually noticed a lot of information has been taken offline. And they said they created slave races, and they created beings I guess they were talking about in Africa, and they created, and some of them over in the Middle East, they talked about these beings to mine. And it's fascinating to look at these historical texts. They had to have come from somewhere. They said they were unable to reproduce on their own. They were later modified with the help of Enki and Ninki. Thus, Adapa was created as a fully functional and independent human being. This modification was done without the approval of Enki's brother Enlil, and they say the conflict of the gods then began. Enlil became the adversary of man, and the Sumerian tablet mentions that men served gods and then went through much hardship and suffering. Now, they said their story was very similar to that of the story of Adam and Eve in Eden. And they're thousands of years apart, but they have the same story of Eden. Let's see. There's so much information about Enki and Eden or Eden. In Greek, Prometheus, geneticist who actually created men, he was called Prometheus, the Titan, the prince who was always defended the creatures against the others. There's a lot of information on ancientorigins.net. It's fascinating, really. It's really fascinating. I've got several links that I'm going to share very, very soon, hopefully. I'm very stopped up again. But think about that. God created these beings, and then just like I've talked about, then those beings, it said that God caused everything to come into being. He called them into being. None of those gods, they were little g gods, not the main one, came into being. And then later, the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ to stop this reign of evil, to stop the reign of evil, to give us the ultimate sacrifice. But there was an interesting story about the leaders, the dark, evil leaders that run society, being the descendants of Cain, who killed Abel, and of that dark and evil leadership, the descendants. And I'll get into all that another time, but it's fascinating. And they say that those in charge, or even the descendants of them today, the the dark arts and all of that stuff that they do to get their way, and they're hoping to get it another final time. And after all, Cain did have to go outside the garden of perfect people, the Garden of Eden, to get a wife and to have children, and hardly any of that's ever mentioned. So it's it's really fascinating. It really is, and all of this here plays into it, in my opinion. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about Inky and all of this? So, much love, peace, signing out. Obviously, I'm still a believer in the Lord, but I just thought I found this to be very interesting. Peace. Give your thoughts if you know more about this. Signing out.